say, season, climate, or biota. Because it depends on fossil fuels, there is no ecological feedback between fuel and fire, no biological linkage among combustion, nutrient cycles, and pathways of succession. The fires burn outside the parameters of natural ecosystems. In this sense, they're internal combustion is radically different from biomass burning. It is precisely the rendering independent of fire and the energy fire produces from the biological systems that produce biomass and soil, that sort of thing. Okay? You dig a piece of fossil carbon out of the ground, either in the form of coal or oil or natural gas, and that energy can be taken anywhere and burned anywhere, and it doesn't matter what your local vegetation community or climate or time of day or any of that is. It's energy released from those types of constraints. Not to mention the fact that it's got a density of carbon that vastly outstrips what you can expect from a piece of wood, right? Per unit weight. So fossil fuels break soil plant fire feedback loops. It shifts the scale of human impact on the environment. This is a big part of why we now, or why some geologists now talk of humans living in a new era, the Anthropocene, in which the driving force of geological change or biogeochemical change is humanity, right? It has important social and historical ramifications. This doesn't come up quite so much. It's touched on in the reading for today, but it's very prevalent through much of Pine's work. Looking at the social dimensions of fire, fire suppression, fire control, what controlling fire enables people to do in terms of other people, right? Control over fire meant control over how people lived. And this was true in the United States in 1905, as much as it's true today in parts of Asia and Africa, where agencies empowered to suppress fire use that power to literally rearrange the livelihoods of people on landscapes where they have evolved, or rather they have developed ways of using fire as part of their livelihood strategies. European fire, and by that he means strict fire suppression, strict control over fire, a fire regime dominated by a sense that we can prevent them if we don't like them, right? And we can eliminate them from vast landscapes, is an anomaly, he says, not a norm. The European model, which became the model that the Forest Service to this day can't quite let go of, was this model in which we just said, okay, we'll use our chainsaws and our tanks and whatever else we need, bulldozers, and we'll stop fire because fire kills timber. You know, we want to grow timber, we need trees. That model is, from any kind of evolutionary point of view, completely out of keeping with the norm. Yeah. Right. 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 There are stories that you can't decide whether to laugh or cry when you read them, of Europeans, usually in the context of colonialism, but not only, walking into other parts of the world with this European model in which trees were what were supposed to be there, fire was bad because it killed trees, any humans who started fires must be trying to kill the forest. And they figured that must be the case in these other places, and set about trying to keep the people who live there from burning in the name of supposedly preventing the loss of these forests. And actual detailed ecological research reveals that because of the nature of the system, it's a different kind of system, it's actually quite the other way around, that the fires that remain are not the result of leaving the humans out, but actually a result of keeping the people, what the people consciously did. And there are examples like that from all over the world. Some great work has been done looking at those types of, basically the political ecology of fire in different parts of the world. Finally, pronounced north-south inequities. And by the end of that chapter, right, Pine has those two maps, right? And one is a map of world CO2 emissions. Fossil fuel burning, actually, is what it is. And you see that it's basically concentrated in the northern hemisphere. It's concentrated in the United States, Canada, Europe, Soviet Union, Russia, Japan. These are the parts of the world that are burning tons of fossil fuels. And then he contrasts that with a picture taken at night, composite picture of satellite images taken at night that show where the biomass fires were happening. And they're almost all in the global south, South America, Africa, Southern Asia, that kind of thing. And the contrast is quite striking. And it's, when you then situate this back into the context of debates about climate change, what do a lot of people in the north want to do to try to stop climate change? They want to stop forest fire burning, right? And deforestation. And the paper, the science paper that I asked you to read for today, makes the case very clear that there's a whole lot of carbon that is sequestered and can be sequestered in forests. And to that extent, yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense to prevent deforestation as a way of addressing, or at least trying to mitigate, climate change. There's no question about it. There's a question there, though, however, when it comes to, in the long run, thinking about over centuries' time, what's really at play here? And on one side, you have biomass burning of trees that grow and die in a matter of 100 or 200 years. On the other side, you've got fossil carbon, which died 300 million years ago. And once it's back in the atmosphere, there's no way of putting it back underground very easily, right? And to that extent, any overall net increase in atmospheric CO2 over the very long term is really much more and almost exclusively about fossil carbon. So how do you then try to weigh those against each other in thinking about climate change? Coevolution, this is just a concept I want you to have. The idea that humans and environments have evolved in mutual interaction with each other rather than in some kind of dualistic, sort of, you can think of them as separate kind of way, right? It's not necessarily helpful, coherent, and cogent to somehow abstract humans from the environment and think of them as somehow separate, right? And then there's the environment over here, which is about nature, and it takes care of itself if you just don't mess with it. In fact, the two are mutually constituting and have been over evolutionary timescales. The mastery of fire is just one particularly sort of pronounced example of this, where the interaction is particularly clear. It enables, it coincides with the evolution of Homo sapiens, it enables their spread around the world, and it results in enormous modifications of natural vegetation patterns. Okay, I've already more or less covered, well, these are some of the uses of fire, different ways of classifying them or thinking about them. Implications of coevolution. These interactions are complex. The most important interactions are ones that tend to be nonlinear across scales. In other words, ones in which there isn't just a simple linear mathematical relationship in which each one sort of increases incrementally with the other, but rather where you see kinds of nonlinear threshold dynamics or tipping points. The difference between shrubland and grassland in the Southwest is one small, very small example. The rules that we can derive from human-environment interactions in a given place tend to be geographically and historically specific. They aren't somehow universal, or at least you can't assume that they're universal just because you found some instance in which they appear to obtain, right? So the European fire policy is a nice example of that. It may be true that in Northern Europe, forest fires kill trees, and if you want to have trees, you should suppress fires. But that's not necessarily the case elsewhere. So, likewise, with climax succession theory for plant vegetation dynamics, or vegetation community dynamics, that theory holds in some systems, but it shouldn't be construed as somehow universally the case. And that's another one of the ways in which Euro-American science has made mistakes by exaggerating the natural law-likeness of the findings that it has discovered and then try to apply them elsewhere. Is the Industrial Revolution the advent of the Anthropocene epoch? This is the kind of question that we can think about. Is this essentially a shift in the evolution of people, or the co-evolution of people and their environments, that is qualitatively different from what preceded it? And when we start thinking about food production and population growth, and you look and you see that point of inflection in the population growth curve at around 1750, 1800, it begins to look like there's a lot to be said for the notion that this is actually a different epoch and things are completely, the rules have changed, so to speak. Karl Marx makes the remark somewhere that the laws of population are different in different societies and not universal. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about here. The social formation, the social relations within a society have a determining effect on the dynamics of population in that society. All right, what have we not covered? I'm interested in your thoughts about, say, the Michael Pollan piece that we read for today. If you can try to situate that in the context of the discussion today and on this past Tuesday. What does Michael Pollan say? What would Michael Pollan say? What would Michael Pollan do? Anybody remember? Anybody following the healthcare debate? Yes?
That we think of health in America as separate from our diet, but really it's, we're actually creating a bigger cost for ourselves in the long run by having cheaper fast food, because later it will become more expensive health bills.
Okay. So the healthcare debate that's been going on since last fall, or summer, I should say, has been carried out largely without talking about the American food system, right? And Pollan suggests this is not wise because the debate is largely about the cost of our healthcare system, which is now what percentage of our economy? Anybody know? It's on its way from being, well, it used to be 1/7, or about 14%. Now it's 1/6, which is more like 16%, and it's continuing to increase. So, 16 cents of every dollar in our economy is spent on healthcare. And he suggests that a significant part of that cost is attributable to the fact that we're not very healthy. Specifically, we're not very healthy in ways that have direct relationship to our food system and the kinds of food we eat. And he talks about the cost of preventable chronic diseases related to obesity and being overweight. So then what? Yeah.
He mentions how the agribusiness is what you need to change first in order to have an effect on the healthcare system. But he quotes an agribusiness bill that agriculture committee of Congress, and they have swatted away most efforts at reform. So until you can change the agribusiness, healthcare issues really aren't going to improve at all either.
Okay. So yeah, go ahead. So healthcare reform, specifically health insurance reform, he suggests, will trigger the involvement of the agricultural industry sector and their lobbyists in this debate in ways that presently are not the case. Right? So he's actually suggesting that right now it's the health lobby, it's the medical lobby, the pharmaceutical companies, the insurers who are interested in this debate and who are lobbying to prevent healthcare reform, or were lobbying at that point in time. Many of them still are. Many of them appear to have more or less succeeded. But he says those lobbyists, no matter how rich they are in fact not as powerful as the lobbyists who defend our agricultural system. The food and agriculture sector is even a larger part of the economy and even more powerfully entrenched in Congress. And for the time being, under our present system, the food industry doesn't really pay much attention to health. But if healthcare reform requires insurers to insure all Americans regardless of prior conditions, the insurance lobby will discover that their profits are threatened by the bad health of Americans, and that therefore their profits are threatened by the agricultural system that produces the food that we eat and produces a lot of our health problems. And he suggests at the end, on a kind of note of optimism, that perhaps this is just what we need. You're right, we can't really fix the healthcare system without addressing the food system, but maybe the only way to address the food system, given the political power of industrial ag, is to get the insurance and medical industries on our sides and make them see that their profits are threatened by our food system. Yeah?
You were saying that it costs like $400,000 to keep people sick, and now supposed to take care of it.
One simple example: the cost of treating diabetes over the lifetime of somebody who gets diabetes, a preventable condition in most cases, is like $400,000. Why not just prevent it in the first place? Yes. Could the insurers just raise premiums? I imagine that depends on the details of the health reform, right? I mean, the idea here is that they aren't going to be allowed to simply refuse to cover people who got these conditions, and therefore some insurance company is going to have to pay the cost of treating chronic diseases. Yeah. Okay. So health costs are an enormous part of the costs of running a business in this country under the current system, and there are employers who have realized that it's in their interest financially to encourage their employees to do things like eat better, exercise more, not smoke, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, also in some nations, the nations will offer insurance companies for each person that they take on that has like an at-risk patient that has a pre-existing condition. They'll give them some sort of subsidy so they can just do that in the United States.
Right. Yeah. Yes. I don't know exactly how. I mean, I think it's usually done in the form of various kinds of incentives. Or it's done in the form of getting rid of the soda in the vending machines in the break room or something like that, right? I mean, New York City has been talking about imposing a tax on soda, which doesn't he say soda constitutes 16% of the calorie intake of the average American teenager? I mean, it's like, yeah. Right. New York there's actually a public health advertising campaign going on right now, I believe, in the New York City area, against junk food. Is it against soda only or against junk food more generally? Oh. Oh, yes. Please don't make soda more expensive. It's cripplingly expensive already, as we know. Yes.
I don't remember where I heard this, but I heard that the reason why healthcare became an issue, a popular issue, was because employers, the rates had just become
Yeah.
too high.
Yeah.
And it just seems like there's a trickling down effect now.
Yeah.
Now this-
Yeah. I mean, Pollan alludes to this in passing, that there are a lot of Fortune 500 companies now that are ready to support healthcare reform because they can't afford the insurance premiums for their own employees, right? And I mean, yeah, it's at the end of the day, I mean, he takes it more or less as a given that Congress is completely bought and paid for, and it's entirely a question of who's paid for them, how much, which is a little discouraging, but it appears to be the case. There are other pieces in the overall picture here that we haven't quite situated yet. So we've got this health stuff mediated by the food sector, and we'll talk later in the semester about the modern food system and its relationship to agriculture and climate change and health and organic agriculture and whether it's an effective solution to these kinds of problems or not. I don't know if we'll come back quite as directly to the question of climate change and deforestation, but I hope the sort of interaction, interrelationship of these different big pieces is a little bit more clear, or at least maybe a little bit more interesting now than it was previously. For Thursday, I've asked you to track down and read the summary for decision makers of the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. Now, this is section 2, pages 141 to 164. What you will find when you open the file is a much longer report. You need to find these pages, and they actually, even though the pagination says 141 to 64, within the PDF, it's pages 15 to 38. So when you hit print, you might want to put those page numbers in, but look carefully before you print, because it might be a little odd. So we'll get to the sort of big picture environmental assessment next time.